Hi, it's Corrine. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'm making two A2 sized cards. I'm using the stamp and stencil set from Altenew called Flutter in Bloom. I recently shared another video using the same stamp and stencil set, and I decided to make more. They were so enjoyable to make, so I couldn't stop myself from stamping and stenciling more. I love the inspiration guide that Altenew gives. Also, they have a great instruction guide with their stamp set or with their stencil set. All their stencils are etched with numbers, so it makes it very simple to follow along. Went ahead and stamped out my image with some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. I gave that a little time to dry. And for my greens, I'm using artichoke and grasshopper. I use Stardust and Spice Cider, all from Concord and Ninth. And the yellow and orange are for the center of the flowers. For my flowers themselves, I pulled out some Distress Oxide, but I remembered that I had these Altenew inks that I've never used. So these, I started with a light one, but I ended up sticking with the darker of those three colors. I believe it's called Galactic Stream. And I'm using a small blending brush, adding a light layer and a little bit darker to the center. I decided in the end, once those dried back, that they were a little bit too light. So I just put the stencil number 1 back on and gave it another coat. I was really happy with how these blended. I don't think I've really ever used the Altenew crisp dye inks to blend, and now I want the entire collection. Blended absolutely beautifully. Just went on super smooth, and I love the results. I did want to deepen up one of the layers of the petals, so I pulled out Mushroom, Concord and Ninth, and just very, very lightly went over the base of the flowers before adding the blue, and it gave it just enough dimension that I wanted. I was looking for a little bit of, a little variation between the petals, and I was really happy with how it turned out. So now I'm going back over it with the blue and adding that on. Once it dries back, they just look so smooth and so pretty. I was really impressed with these crisp dye inks. So here's where I decided it was a little too light. I wanted them to match a little bit better than that. So I just placed the first stencil back on and gave it another coat. For the leaves, I gave the entire leaf a coat of grasshopper and then deepened them a little bit with the artichoke to give them the dimension that I was looking for. And there's a second layer of stencils. I do the exact same thing with the second layer. For the flower centers, I go over them with Stardust and then deepen them a little bit with the Spice Cider. Concord and Ninth colors, I've used those a lot, and they always blend very well. This is all on a 9x12 grip mat. You could just glue your paper to your work surface if that's easier. I just like that the grip mat kind of holds everything in place and is super easy to clean up. And look how pretty that turned out. I love their stencils because it's kind of just an easy way to get beautiful results. I do like a dark black outline, so I'm using the transparency film to kind of test it out on using my same dark ink. And once I'm happy that that's all going to be lined up again, I'll take out the transparency and clean it off with some alcohol and then give that another inking with the black ink. So I wanted to make another one. I used the smaller cluster of flowers. They have that labeled as B, and their stencils are labeled B as well. Here's the colors that I used. I used Ballet Slipper and Honeysuckle for the flowers to deepen them up. For the centers, I used Buttercup, and then I love the combination of Sprout and Grasshopper for the leaves. And then of course I used the same black for my outline. I recently shared a few cards on my channel using a Simon Says Stamp artwork grid die, and I actually have this die by Simon Says Stamp as well. This one's the horizontal stripes. I store them in the same stamp pocket or die pocket, and when I saw that I thought, oh, this would be a great thing to do with these cards as well. So I just went ahead and ran that through my die cut machine. They also punch out that frame, and I'm going to cut this out a few more times using matching cardstock. I'm using Nina 80-pound cardstock, and I'll just put those in a little craft container by scrapbook.com. So behind these rectangle pieces, I went ahead and added, I believe, 3. Actually, I think I added 2 pieces. I'll show you here. I glued them together and lined them up and then just gave them a little chance to dry. Okay, so I apologize. I did do 3. I did 3 layers and then the stenciled layer to the top of them. And I'm doing both cards a little bit differently. On this card, I wanted to give these horizontal stripes some dimension. So for my base, I knew that I wanted to probably pop this entire base up or give it some dimension. So I pulled out a piece of 120-pound cardstock, and using a little bit of glue runner and wet glue, I glued down my main panel to the card. This is the frame that I'm gluing down. And then this way it gives it some sturdiness to it, so I could pop the entire thing up and make it dimensional. So for my piece, I pulled out a lightweight piece of black chipboard, and I'm just going to mark it with a pencil instead of measuring it. I'm doing it the lazy way, marking it with a pencil and taking it to my cutter and cutting it down to size. And this will be my frame piece. I still end up adding a little bit more dimension to it than I show here. And now I'm just simply gluing in my pieces. Again, these have 3 layers of white cardstock below them, so every other piece in the pattern is dimensional. Turned out super pretty. The second card you'll see me do, I do the opposite. I make the frame part dimensional, and it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of another. It kind of turns out to be the same, but I actually like the way the other card turned out if I had to choose a little bit better. But they're both really pretty. If you haven't tried this before, this is just a super easy, yet I think the recipient would be impressed by this. Gave that a little time to dry. And I pulled out an A2 sized top folding card. I'll just go ahead and add a little bit of tape to that to hold it in place while I glue my panels down. I'm using some Beacon Fabri-Tac glue. I will add that chipboard piece down, and I decided to add a little bit more dimension to the card. Sometimes I use foam tape, other times I use scrap pieces of cardstock. So I had 3 scrap pieces of 120-pound cardstock. It's a nice thick cardstock, so it does give it like a little bit of a lightweight chipboard feel, and I love the dimension that it adds to the card. So I just used the same Fabri-Tac glue, added those together, glued them behind my stenciled piece, and then glued that onto the black matting. So this card has a nice weight to it. And if I made a little bit larger envelope, I always like to make my own envelopes. If I made a little larger envelope, it'll fit nicely. I just probably will make it a little bit larger than A2 size. So I decided to pull out some pre-made sentiments that I have in my stash. I like to make them from time to time, or if I'm not sure what sentiments to use, I'll make several and then I'll save the ones I don't use. So I'm just kind of digging through those to decide what I liked. And I come across this thanks that I had made with a black background and silver paper on top. I absolutely loved how it looked with that, but I wanted the hugs. So what I did is pulled out the hugs die and some silver glitter cardstock. Here I'm trying to give you a look of that glitter cardstock, and I just made another sentiment. That way I could have the black shadow piece with the glitter hugs on the inside. And the shadow piece, I glued 2 pieces of black cardstock together, so it has a little heft to it, and it doesn't, I don't want them to get bent easily when I put them through the mail. So I'm using my Barely Art Glue in a fine tip bottle. I will glue those down and put them under a magnet to give them some time to dry. My craft mat is just a regular craft mat that I turned into a magnetic craft mat, and I do have a video on my channel that I'll link to below if you're interested. So now I'm trying to decide where I wanted the hugs. I was super happy with how that looks with those cluster of flowers. Being that there is dimension on the horizontal panels, I needed to add a little bit of dimension behind them with some foam tape, so I used some Stampin' Up! Foam tape that I had in my stash. Pulled out some silver glittered gems, but they didn't look right, and I decided to use some iridescent dewdrops that I have, and I just scattered those about, again using that fine tip glue bottle and a jewel picker, and gave those a little time to dry. I'll give a closer look of this card at the end. So for the pink card, I ran it through it a little bit more of an angle. And I also cut out some white cardstock. I thought I was going to make the same similar card that I just made, but instead I'm using this frame and making that dimensional. So all those pieces that you see in that craft container, I'm not going to use those, but I did save them because they're perfect label, sentiment label size. So I'll save those for a quick way to add dimension behind labels, sentiment labels. So I'm going to glue that down on a scrap piece of paper that I had, just in order to be able to keep it all together and put it on my card base. And I added one of the frames down first. Now I'm adding, as you can see, my stenciled piece, and then I'll go back and add 2 more white frames, and then my stenciled frame on top of that. I ended up just using my wet glue. I just thought that was easier. And I just kind of lined that all up, gave it a chance to dry. And here's the final piece that kind of puts it all together. I have some pre-cut cardstock bases. So I chose a top folding card, and I'll hold my magnets on that. I do slip a white piece of paper under it to make it easier to see, so I can try and get it centered on my card front. And again, I just pulled out a few of my pre-made sentiments. So as I saw that hugs on here, I knew that's what I wanted to use, because this card is going to a friend of mine that's going through a difficult time. And to finish this card off perfectly, I pulled out Teresa Collins enamel dots, and this yellow looked perfect with it. I thought it was the perfect finishing touch. I like to finish off the inside of my cards. If I don't know who the card's going through to at the time, I'll leave it blank, or in this case, put in a piece of colored cardstock. And I matched the color cardstock with the leaves on the front, which is grasshopper from Concord and Ninth. And here you can see those iridescent jewels. So pretty. Those are dewdrops. And I love the dimension that this card has. Same with the hugs. For the inside of this card, it says, I stamped, "Let your faith be bigger than your fear." Hang in there. And I did black ink for the main sentiment, and hang in there I used the grasshopper ink, again tying in that green on the front. So I hope you've enjoyed the process of these cards coming together. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.